Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to today's episode of Pause Reset. I'm excited to introduce you to today's amazing guest, and that is Jason Allan Scott. He's someone I deeply respect and value for so many reasons, and you're going to learn some of those today. He's also one of the key people that have helped me be here actually recording and sharing this podcast, and for that I'm a really big thanks. So it's a great pleasure to introduce you to my friend, the one and only Jason. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be on it.
You're so kind, darling, as always. So for people that may not know you yet, having come up with your reset, who are you now and what are you focused on today?
I am now still, for as long as I can be, a human being on this great planet, third rock from the sun. I'm currently working on a way to help people with affordable workplaces and affordable homes around the world with something called Copus, kopus.com, which is Latin for opus, for work, to co-work, to be work together, and then something called makeroom.io, which is affordable housing. And we're kind of working on the two to allow people an opportunity which the world and history and geopolitical opportunities have held from them for way too long.
I love it. And I know we're going to hopefully get onto it in this conversation today. You've done lots of different things, and there's sort of a driver driving you, which isn't always obvious at the outset. So if you look back on your life till now, what's been the biggest shifts and resets you've been through? And you've been through some incredible stuff, I know. So what's been the biggest, that's caused the big resets in my life?
Very good question. And I think one of I did a talk at Siemens in Berlin a couple of years back, and I did it on these three industries that I had been in. I started a swimming school in Bangkok and sold it. I had started a event company and sold it. And I started a podcast and sold it. And they said, what do these things have in common? They have nothing in common. And I said, well, what they have in common is the fact that I like the industry. It's stuck to my mantra. My mantra is always the same. And I have two mantras. The first is never be a boss, never have a boss. So I'm always looking for a way to be my own boss, to create my own future, to create my own opportunities. And the second was this idea that in the end of our lives, only three questions matter. Did you love? Did you matter? And did you live? And those three industries, those three opportunities allowed me to do that. Recently, on my third divorce, I had a major reset. I suddenly questioned everything. Was it worth pursuing life on this planet if all I was going to do was fall down, if I'd constantly restart? Something I'd always done with quite ease, but I think it's one thing to be forced to restart versus choosing to restart. I find pausing very difficult. I find restarting very easy, because I can get passionate very quickly. I can be enmeshed with the people in an industry or the information that exists within an industry or the YouTube videos and the blogs and really get excited. But to pause, to slow down, I find incredibly hard. My most recent divorce, my most recent separation was 2.5 years ago at the moment. And it allowed me to stop and look at what's really important in this life. The relationships, the mission we're on, the people we're on with together to create that mission or to work through that mission. And truly the journey is all that counts. The destination, unfortunately, is death. And at some point, we're all going to get there. There's no reason to rush that. And I think I'd spent a lot of my time, a lot of my life rushing from one milestone to the next, whether it's writing my first book or doing my first talk or starting my first business or getting, my first stamp in my passport. It was always this rush to get things done. So stopping and going are very, very good to me, very easy to me, very natural to me, versus pausing is something I'm learning to do.
And pause. So firstly, wow, right? Because you've covered quite a lot there, from the swimming school in Bangkok to events, businesses, building and selling things, 3 divorces. That's huge resets. And I love that you're already owning the next question we really focus on, which is what's hardest for you. And as you said, you're good at going, right, I'm resetting off and going, but that pause, I know a bit of your back history, they may not know they're hearing you the first time. Why do you think that's been so hard for you? And you touched on this sort of drive. Is that possibly the childhood experiences you had?
Absolutely. I think we all fall within a certain type of animal preset, if you will. For some people, a sloth is their spirit animal. They're quite happy to sit around and do very little and eat when they need to and watch television and read.
The Big Lebowski, right? The Big
Yes,
Lebowski.
yes, perfect example. Yes,
hey.
A great visual image as well. I am a shark. I've always felt like if I stop moving, I will die. There's a great play called Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, fantastic musical. And in it, there is a song called I'll Write My Way Out. This belief that if he doesn't do it, no one will come and save him. He needs to write his own narrative. He needs to write his way out of his situations. And that's how I've always felt. Whether it was growing up incredibly poor in Cape Town, South Africa, with a minority within a minority, a white person in a predominantly black country, and then being a poor white, which is less than 13% of the entire country, I knew that if I didn't come up with something, nobody was coming to save us. The government wasn't coming to save us. The council wasn't coming to save us. No one was coming to save us. So I was always trying to work out, what can I do? And I've always had this firm belief that action was the enemy of thought. That instead of navel gazing and thinking over and over to try and get myself out of a problem, I had a much better chance just actioning something. Something was always better than nothing. So the idea of pausing always felt to me like an inaction, right? That it wasn't contemplative. It was more stopping without a plan. And that really scared me. So I think that's why pausing has always been so difficult for me.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because your journey, from the selling seven-figure businesses stuff, another end, that's a huge success, right? And even though you've got there, you clearly haven't stopped. You're not just looking at one startup, there's two startups, and
yeah,
you and I try to catch up. You're always busy. It's like in a month. It's like, okay.
Yes, yes, that is so true. But it's also because and maybe this comes from not having any kids. Like I was saying to someone recently, he said, "Oh, you've done so much, it's unbelievable." And I said, "Yes, but it's kind of like Albert Einstein. He used to say, if people realize how much time I put to solving a problem, they wouldn't think I was so smart." If you realize that I don't have any kids and I actually have a lot more time than the average person of my age throughout my ages, then you realize I've had more time to do things. I've had more time to write books or do talks or travel or try ideas. And it's always just been me. For a large part of my life, it has been just me. So that makes it slightly easier, because if things go wrong, I'm the only person that has to be accountable. I'm the only person that has to deal with that. So I always try to make my risk profile really low, so that I think, well, if the worst happens and I lose everything, that's okay. I started from nothing. I can work my way back up again, as long as I have a certain amount of things in place. And it's never going to be that bad. It's never really going to end up with death. I mean, most of the time, so far, so good.
Well, firstly, I love that you're already you're planning ahead for reset, right? That's part of the whole thing is, look, I can do that. And that ability is excellent. And I think you may have already been sort of leading the witness here. The most important thing you wish you could have given yourself when you're younger, would it have been to take more time and enjoy things, to pause more?
Absolutely.
Or something else? Like, what was that lesson, and why do you think? Like, your younger self, you could go back and send it for your 5, 8, 10-year-old self. What do you wish you could have learned?
I think I wish I could have learned that there is very few things more important than health.
Yeah.
That the truth is that health is the most important thing we have. That if you have health, you have hope. And if you have hope, you have everything. And I took for granted my health for most of my life, I'd say. I took for granted how many hours I could work, or how late I could stay up, or how much writing I could do, how much concentration I could put into a certain thing. So I think I would have told myself to relax and be in it, be in the moment as a healthy human, to take time to think about what no sleep for days is doing to my health. What worrying about little stupid things, like as someone who ran a club in London, worrying about what the carpet looked like on arrival, or if the elevator was quick enough, or if the cloakroom gave them the correct sequential numbers to collect their jacket, was worth becoming obese. Someone recently congratulated me, which I'd never been congratulated before, from going from 144 kilograms to 85 kilograms, which I am now, and keeping it off for 7 years. And I never thought of that, but I was so stressed at the time. I didn't sleep. I ate terribly. I drank. All of that, I don't think helped with my health at all. I didn't care. I kept thinking it was small sacrifices. And everyone knows the whole hustler culture of just work it out, work through it. You'll be fine. Work through it. I think if I could go back to myself, I'd say, no, don't work through it. Focus on your health. Focus on taking care of yourself. You can't fill someone else's cup unless your cup is full.
I love that. And especially, I remember that my nightclub days when I was a much younger man. And yeah, you work till 3 a.m, and then it's 5 a.m. the next day, and there's always next weekend and the next problem and the next firefight. And there is no taking a day off, and that it's a strange beast. And in your holiday, and knowing you, your brain's still thinking. I've seen you sort of podcasting on your trips and another thing going on, firing off. I love that. So thank you for being that on. That's lovely. And, you've read books and you watch movies, I think, right, in your travels. There's some downtime. What book or movie has most helped you navigate that? And when you needed to pause, stop, and reset, because you've been through a lot, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the book or movie that's most sort of helped you when you needed to sort of go out from that dark tunnel?
If I can be greedy, I'm going to choose one of each. I'm going to say, for a film, The Pursuit of Happiness, the idea that you can change your circumstance with education, with regrouping, with resetting, with focus on the pound. Don't jump over the penny. Don't jump over the pound to get to the penny. Focus on the pound, go for the pound, as he did in Pursuit of Happiness. And then there's a fantastic book by Jerry Weintraub called If I Stop Talking, You'll Know I'm Dead.
Wow.
And it's absolutely brilliant about a young man who talked himself into some of the most incredible opportunities from putting Frank Sinatra in the middle of a ring and a huge event around that, to talking to George Clooney about doing Ocean's 11 and 12 and 13. And also not being scared to stop at any age and go, is this really what I want? Is this really what life is about? And it's a beautiful autobiography. And I often go back to that. And those are the two things. The Pursuit of Happiness as a film, absolute redemption story about refocusing and resetting and pausing, as he does, to work out that he needs to study as opposed to selling this medical equipment. And then, of course, Jerry Weintraub, You'll Know I'm Dead When I Stop Speaking.
Well, the movie, I know. The movie gets me every time because it's Hollywood, but there's more reality to that, in a real, like we've all been through, there's more of that than you'll realize. And that book, I haven't actually read that. I haven't come across that, but that's on the list. That will be.
Send me your address. I will post it to you.
I will definitely do that. But I think it's those things. And I guess I can hear the joy in you when you're talking about it. You get inspired when others succeed, right? Some people go, I can't do that. You're going, I could do that too, right? Is that some of what goes on for you?
Absolutely. My dad, when I was a kid, said there are two types of people in this world. There's the person that wants you to do better than they do, who wants you to stand upon their shoulders so that you can see further than they ever saw. And the other who wants to keep you down so they always look like they know what they're doing and they're always ahead of you. And I'm definitely someone that loves the success of the people around me. I want you to be more successful. I want you to go further. I will, as you know from today, push down and be like, hey, you can do better than this. Like, hey, we can do this together. You just need to remember to do this and just do this step. And I often cross the line by doing that, but I'd rather cross the line as a supportive friend than someone that's kind of laissez-faire and is only focused on my own happiness and my own success.
And again, one that I love you is you're incredibly generous with your time, especially when you had more time.
Though I do wish I had more time.
But you're also really humble. It's really interesting. And I sort of dragging stuff out of you today a bit because I think you're one of those people everybody knows, but nobody knows. Even though there's huge podcasts and books and but you're actually underneath you, the real story of where you're going, I think hasn't even been scratched yet. So I'm quite excited about that.
Thank you very much.
And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you think through everything, right? What was the event or experience that most caused you to have to really turn everything around, to really go through that heavy, deep, not a small, I'll go from room A to room B, but a real life-changing thing? And when you went through it, what helped you get through that? Because one of the things that people find is it's sort of, when you're through it, it's easy to look back and go, that was easy sometimes, right? But in the middle, you want to give up. You've touched on that very openly at the start of the recording, which I really, appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. There's been the biggest one is 12 years old. I get shot. I'm bleeding to death on a chair in a hospital in South Africa. I've been told that I have no medical aid, which in South Africa is a death sentence. No one's going to spend time fixing me. They haven't even bothered to put me on a bed because I'm a poor white, so they put me on a chair. I'm holding my own IV with the only arm that works. And everyone's walking past as if I'm already dead. And I remember turning to this person next to me who had thrown themselves off a bridge onto a train and survived. And I said, aren't I supposed to see flashes of my life before I go? And he looked at me and he said, well, you're very young. Maybe you just haven't had that much life, right? Like that.
I'm laughing because that's really quite heavy, right?
Yeah, it was. So yeah, it freaked me. I never forget. I remember being really freaked out by that. I hadn't had any life. I hadn't had I haven't got a highlight reel. Nothing had happened. I'd gone to school. I joined a gang as a kid just to steal bread and stuff to, to create a family unit around myself. And then I was going to die. And that was it. That was my story. It was played out. It was done. I'd just been on the statistic. And that was a major shift for me, was to realize that I was not going to be held back. I wasn't going to be held back by shame. I wasn't feeling white and poor and feeling guilty for that. I wasn't going to be held back by my ego, by being too scared to ask for help, by my fear of anything, fear of public speaking, fear of flying, fear of traveling, fear of leaving the house, fear of any of the things that I'd seen in my community and my own family be scared of. So I think that was one of the biggest shifts, the biggest events that ever occurred to me, was this idea that it's all just memories. It's all just the story we tell ourselves. It's all just fighting against our own narratives that we've probably inherited by our family, our people, our culture, whatever it is. And I remember my grandparents talking about leaving Europe to come to South Africa. And I was like, why can't you go back? Like, we've had this terrible life here. Why? And they just couldn't imagine it. It seemed impossible.
And this is the whole thing, right? I'm not going to get you back on track for time because I really want to get into some more, but that's exactly the pause, start, reset stuff, which is, oh, we can't because.
Yeah.
And you go, but you can. But
of course you can.
So firstly, there's a much longer conversation to get into about how you got shot, why you got shot. But what got you through that? Was it just being literally in the middle of nowhere and the inner voice? How did you navigate that out?
My dad ended up taking me to a private hospital, which they look after me for 3 days, and they get me to go out, and they kind of tell me I'll never be able to use my right arm again, and that my chest is caved in. And I, in total, fairness to my father, he just kind of went, no, you're not going to get a sling. You're not going to get any help with that arm. You're going to work out how to use it again, and you can learn how to be left-handed. You're 12 years old. You're not a freaking adult. You can work it out. And I get forced to stand up in class every day and speak in front of the class. I'm not allowed to have to write my answers because I can't write yet. I'm still teaching myself with my left arm. But I learned to stand up in class every day and answer questions. And I get better at speaking in public, and I get better at being put under the spotlight. And I stop using all the tricks that you use as a kid, and trying to buy yourself time and but and flowery language. And what I learned from that is that we're learning beings. We adapt. That's what we're great at. That's the only thing that we beat every animal on the planet to do, the ability to adapt. I could teach myself to write with my left hand. I could teach myself to play basketball with my left hand, my favorite sport at the time. I could teach myself to stand up and take on my fears of public speaking and speak to teachers and speak to adjudicators. I could speak to my class. I could explain myself. And eventually I could slowly start using my right arm by pushing it through the pain. That behind pain was reward every single time. That through pain, you can't ignore pain. Pain doesn't go away because you don't believe in it. It's like gravity.
Yep. It comes back again and again and gets worse and worse. Yep.
It just keeps coming. Yeah. And I think for me, what I learned throughout that whole period was that it never got easy. It wasn't like the films. It wasn't like I suddenly realized something and everything was simple and I was just this amazing ride. It was a good day, and then I'd have a bad day. Then I'd have a couple of bad days, and I'd have one good day and a couple of bad days. And that never ended. I do a talk at the moment once a month on resilience. And I said, I've been very lucky. I faced 2 bombings by terrorists. I've been shot. I, was in Thailand through the tsunami. I was in South Africa during the AIDS pandemic. I'm now living through this pandemic. There's been some huge things, but what you learn is that resilience is a muscle. It gets stronger the more you test it. And we've all been through resilience, whether it's through a breakup, whether it's moving house, whether it's changing jobs. The moment we reset, the moment we pause, the moment we stop, that resilience muscle is being flexed. And it's saying, how much can you jump back? How much can you bounce back? And where do you want to bounce to? And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is this constant reminder. I've also got a mantra, which is written on a frame in the house, which simply says, has anybody in the history of time less clever or stupider than you worked this out? That's it. Because if they have, why can't I? Someone worked it out. I'm going to be able to work it out. So,
well, you're making my life easy, because you're asking the next question, which is like, what's your advice for somebody listening that is sort of, we all have those days. We need to shift something, what's possible, especially with what's going on at the moment. And it sounds like, I love that mantra. I haven't heard that one before, but anybody stupider, less smart, less skillful, done it. Well, guess what? Come on. And I'm paraphrasing badly. I love that. And
no, you paraphrase great. That's a better one than my one written down, but that's exactly it. Steve Jobs said something very similar. He said his biggest realization came when he realized that nothing in the world was created by anyone that was smarter than he was, that everything had been created just by people who wanted to create it, who had a desire that was stronger than all the problems that came in the way of getting it done. And that's what I remind myself. I had no business starting a swimming school. I could hardly swim. Right? I went from school to school, opening up swimming schools, hiring swimming teachers in Thailand, in a country that I was not. I was another foreigner. I was a Falang. Those who've been to Thailand, you know what a Falang is, a foreigner. My Thai wasn't good, well or spoken enough to be able to speak to the kids in the pool. I didn't know how many teachers per kid to be in the pool. I didn't know health and safety. I didn't know how to write a curriculum. I had absolutely no idea.
This is where we would go, pause, Jason. This might be the right idea. And you're like, no, doing it anyway. Off we go. And
yes, doing it anyway. I was like, kids drown every year in Southeast Asia. I'm going to come up with a plan. And that was all it was. And even with events, I'd never even organized my own birthday. I'd never done that world. I wasn't a clubber when I started a club, but I wanted to do it. I thought that it would give me the benefits of meeting great people, of having great experiences, of having great stories. So when I do finally close my eyes for the last time, my highlight reel is going to be pretty freaking awesome, which would make my 12-year-old self so bloody happy for being able to, and all the people I've got to help in my life. That I think is going to be the thing that I focus on the most during my highlight reel.
Again, I know you, and I'm hearing new stuff today, which is having me kind of go, I get you differently, and I get it. The thing I love about it, and it's sort of almost my question for you, the next one, really takeaway is, how do you do that while staying okay? Because it's easy to get sucked into, especially if you're a healthy person and you want to help others, the boundaries thing and their problem becoming your problems, and it's challenging. So again, that'd be another conversation. So if anybody's listening in today, what takeaway would you love them to get from listening to you? What's like, I get a bit of like, leave that sort of memory reel at the end, live a life that's good for you, but that's not quite what I'm hearing. But what's that for you, do you think, the takeaway you'd love them to get?
I think what I'd love everyone to get is the idea that none of this really counts. That the only thing that counts is if we've had a good life, is if we've loved someone, truly loved someone, if we've been loved in return, if we do something that helps someone, anyone, anywhere, that gives our life meaning. And that can happen in the smallest thing, from being kind to someone, from being thankful to someone, by reaching out occasionally and checking in on someone. That's all it takes. And really, no one's going to remember the time you caked your pants because you were scared to go diving off a board, or you didn't take on that job, or you didn't ask that girl or boy out, that you didn't, stand up for your rights or your beliefs. None of that stuff matters to anyone. We're not as special as we'd like to think to the world, but we should be that special to ourselves. And you asked me, how do I stay focused on things? Systems. I don't have strong willpower at all. I wish I did. But what I do is I build in systems. I build in I pre-schedule my entire week on a Sunday. So when someone says, hey, but can you help me out? I need you to come at 3:00. I want to always go, I'll drop everything. I'm with you at 3:00. But I'll look at my calendar, which already has my system built in, that says, no, 3:00 on Wednesday, you're talking to investors, or you're reading 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel for an hour. And then you've got an hour's break. And then you've got this. So maybe you can do a 15-minute call. But having it all there, I think, makes a gigantic difference. Jesse Itzler said, wars are won in the tents on battlefields, not by the soldiers on the ground. And I think he's right. It's that planning. It's that team structure around you. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? And sticking to that. It's far more powerful than having a weapon and being thrown into it. And you talked about club life earlier. I remember when I started in club life, and I remember saying, well, what happens if this goes wrong? And shouldn't we have a plan? And they were like, no, we'll take the fire out when the fire comes. Like, we'll handle it when it happens, in the moment, right? Like, no one has a plan. And that's why things go terribly wrong. So having a plan makes a gigantic difference. Having a system. Don't trust your willpower. Trust the system.
I'm going to slightly challenge you with that, right? Because at the same time,
please,
as you get around more high elite projects and people, you have a plan and you know how to reset when you need to. One of the things that will happen with entrepreneurs, business owners, is they had a plan, stick to the plan, the world's changed, and it isn't working very well, right? And I've been there. We've all gone, it'll work out. It's not working. One day. And there's a great book, I'll swap books, the Seth Godin one, about the dip. This last bit of, do you carry on or do you stop? Is it 1 inch from gold, or is it time to have a new journey start? And it's a fun one, right? The podcast, the guy's chanting for years, nothing's happening. And then sometimes one new title, one new thing, and it all works out. The other story, they carry on. And I think what I'm hearing behind it all is, if you're loving what you're doing, loving making a difference, impacting, making a mattering in the process, it doesn't really matter. We've been talking a lot about that, sort of the who's in journey with you, not the destination of the journey.
I love the dip, and I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm very strict on that. Like, I have a 100-day policy. If I haven't hit my success metric in 100 days, I will drop whatever I'm doing and do something else. I don't have time bias, fiscal bias. A lot of my friends will go, but you spent all this time doing it. Oh, you spent all this money trying it. Nope, it's gone. Didn't work. 100 days are done. I move on. Exactly 100 days, like to the freaking number. 100 emails, 100 calls, 100 podcast episodes, 100 blogs, 100 tweets, whatever, 100 times asking a girl out. I do not care. I will set a goal and I'll just keep trying until I've hit that metric and go, okay, I've done the best I can.
I'm going to pause time. My playful challenge for the listener or for you is, why 100? Why is it not 50 or 99? But not to mess your system, but it's like, I love that you have it and you've gone, because granddad had 100. It's like, okay.
Excellent question. Why that number? Yeah, I don't know where 100 comes from. I think it was based on Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, and I'd broken down to 100. And then if you did an hour, whatever, it comes 10,000. I can't actually remember. It's a very good question. But I will say this in retribution to your comment, which I think is a very good one. How do you know? I think if you decide on what success looks like, and maybe success is, so for a podcast, classic example, you mentioned that. I have a lot of friends who start podcasts. They don't make any money. They don't do anything with it. It didn't get them anywhere. And they're like, well, Jason, I tried a podcast and it didn't work for me. So how come it worked for you? And I said, well, season 1 of the Guest List podcast, my first podcast, wasn't a success. I didn't have any plan. I just did the podcast because I wanted to do a podcast. I thought it'd be great to tell my story of starting a business or starting a tech business, my first ever tech business. Venue Me, absolute fiasco. And Venue Me, I decided 100 days to try this idea out. And I was going to do a podcast around my 100 days, which I did. And I got to the end of it and I closed it. Spoiler alert, back of an Uber, end of episode 11, season 1 of the Guest List podcast. My partner at the time turns to me and says, drop it all. Cancel Venue Me, cancel this podcast. Nothing's making you money. And that was my metric of success. You haven't got any traction. No one signed up for this idea. So I knew immediately VenueMe didn't have any traction. That was what my metric of success was going to be. I needed at least one person to give me some money. No one did. The podcast didn't go anywhere. I only had 100 listeners, which to me seemed like nothing at the time. I didn't know either that if I'd just taken some time through some research, if you've got more than 134 listeners, you've done better than 50% of all podcasts in the world.
Wow. That's scary, right?
Yeah. So I only needed to do another 34. Yeah, exactly. You'll beat me. But then when I hired a mentor to do the podcast, John Lee Dumas, EO Fire, and I went through his course, and I realized actually, if I can get 100 people to give me $100 over the period of 12 months, well, that's a nice little salary for just doing podcasting. Yeah, for just telling them my story and just asking them what their problems are and then solving it, whether it was, mentorship or consulting or talks, or I kept finding ways to make money out of my podcast. But I gave it a metric of success. The metric was going to be financial for that. And my metric for VenueMe was going to be traction for that. And right now with Copus, our metric was or has been for the last 100 days, traction. Can we prove concept? And if we can't, then we drop it. We don't care how much was done with it. Like we're happy to move on and we've hit traction. And then our next metric was, can we get an app built? Okay, we hit that metric. And next was, can we get a website built? Hit that metric. And as long as we keep hitting that metric and enjoy the people we work with and the journey we're on, like you said, then it makes it worthwhile. Because I'm going to be doing something anyway. Why not try and do something that I'm going to enjoy with the people that I like to be around?
I love it. And you mentioned some great people already. Is there anybody that you'd love us to be asking these questions to that that our listeners might not yet?
Very good question. Yes, I would try and speak to a Rupert Barksfield, who I think is the COO of PYNK, and a product called Magic Lines, which is helping people with Alzheimer's walk. And I think he's got another startup called Get Subly, I want to say, which is subtitled Video Tech. Just amazing, innovative thinker, a father of 2 kids, under 2, got to be incredibly hard, let alone running 3 businesses, one in fintech as well, which is incredibly difficult. But I think these questions would really help your listeners, especially the way he would answer them, because he's such an innovative person. The other one is Shed Samo, the author, creative thinker.
Yeah, crazy, wonderful creativity and implements. He's very good at getting an idea and then doing stuff with it in a crazy way, in a good way. Amazing guy.
Correct. He's one of his books was called The Idea Man. And I remember saying to him, you're not just the idea man, you're the executor of your idea, man. He created a dating app with one man on the entire dating app called Shinda.
Genius.
Genius. Like, what if you want to date? That's a great way. And then he got into all these magazines and traveled all over. And so, yes, I would say reach out to Shed on Twitter. I think he's at Shed. And get him on the show. You would be brilliant with him because the way your questions flow are perfect for him. And he's a great person to teach all your listeners how to implement on great ideas.
Well, whether we get them on or not, it's still people that you can go explore. And I love that you've been mentioning how much whether you realize it or not, inspire and mentor others and learn from them and this sort of ongoing process. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they've heard us talking and they've gone, there's something about this guy, Jason. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes, thank you very much. LinkedIn is probably the best at the moment, which is just Jason, Jason Allan Scott. Scott. I do answer all my own LinkedIn messages. It just sometimes takes a while. And of course, you can Twitter. I'm at Jason Allan Scott, Instagram at Jason Allan Scott, Facebook at Jason Allan Scott. But I don't really answer any of those unless you're already a friend. I've got to be honest. Where with LinkedIn, I will at least take the time to say thank you or write something back, even if it's very short.
And I will tell you, you have an amazing meme game. You are like doing more posting. It's incredible amount you're putting out. It's like, I can't keep up.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the memes. Well, you know what it is I always put up everything that I would like to see. So if I'm having a day where I'm really struggling with motivation, I'll put a motivation post up for myself to be able to go back to it and go, that's a reminder, Jason. Or if I need a laugh, I'll put up a jokey meme to remind myself it's okay to take a moment and just smile and then move on. So all of that stuff is just for me. So if it helps one other person, that's a bonus.
Well, look, we have to wrap up very shortly. And so, Jason, thank you so much for being us today. Honestly, I've had an amazing time getting to know you a bit better. Great insights for us. And again, the nudge to start this podcast and start sharing more of Pause.Reset. Personally, what I found most valuable was there's something about you, which is hard to put into words for me. And it goes back to, like you said, you were in the hospital, you've had the shooting, and yet it's like, right, I'm going to do this. Whereas many of us would be like, oh, well, it's dangerous. You're like, I'm a shark, I'm going for it. And you just keep going. And I know you say you don't pause, but I think you do more than you realize. When you have that sort of moment of 100 days in, is it working? I'm out, I'm resetting. you're really good at doing it, but you're so good at getting yourself back in flow and leaving those memes for yourself. And honestly, I've been quite inspired watching how you get stuff done and get out there. And at the same time, I've done one thing, you've done two or three, and they've got this great traction momentum behind you. But I also think you're also been sharing, it isn't like an overnight success. You've not just sort of rocked up to London and done what you've done. You've been doing different things. You'd never know unless you get time to really get connected and start listening to people. So thank you for that. And again, maybe you could say it in your words, those 3 questions on your website.
Did you live? Did you love? Did you matter? The only 3 questions we ever have to answer to ourselves.
And I hopefully know today the answer is yes, right, for you, yeah? So thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's time for us to pause, start, reset. Before we do, so you get maximum value, make sure you head to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and do me a favor, add a comment on what you heard today from Jason, and take action on that got you sort of thinking differently. And we'll see you next time. Jason, thank you so much. Any last words, Jason?
It's been absolutely brilliant. I knew you were born to do this, as Lady Gaga says, and you've absolutely proved it today. So well done.
Well, we all do that one step at a time. With that, we're going to pause, start, reset, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
You've just heard a great podcast. Want to start your own? Email jason@apodcastcompany.com.